Hi, everyone. Good to see you again. I'm Anne-Marie Green.
I'm Vladimir Dutip. We begin this hour in Washington, where Democrats have rejected President Trump's plan to end the partial government shutdown. He proposed offering temporary protections to so-called dreamers in exchange for a border wall funding. But Democrats are not budging.
This comes as we enter day 31 of the shutdown. CBS News Chief Washington correspondent Major Garrett has more from the White House.
I want this to end. It's got to end now.
The president who once owned the shutdown
I will be the one to shut it down.
now wants to sell.
I am here today to break the logjam.
As federal workers, some turning to food banks over this weekend, face another round of missed paychecks, economic anxiety, and pressure is building.
Both sides in Washington must simply come together.
The president offered protection from deportation for some refugees and immigrants brought here by their undocumented parents for 3 years, that in exchange for his original $5.7 billion wall funding demand.
Walls are not immoral.
The White House wall language is also softening from this campaign roar.
We're going to build a wall, folks. Precast concrete, going very high. We have 1,000 miles that we need.
To this downsized description.
This is not a 2,000-mile concrete structure from sea to sea. These are steel barriers in high-priority locations.
And while the White House is using lofty language to sell the deal,
one of my favorite quotes from Dr. King was, "Now is the time to make real the promises of democracy." That's exactly what President Trump is calling on the Congress to do.
House Speaker Nancy Pelosi called the plan a non-starter. Democrats who doubt the president's plan could pass the House or Senate appear unwilling to budge.
Offering some of those protections that he took away back in exchange for the wall is not a compromise, but hostage-taking.
All right, Major Garrett, you're joining us now from the White House. Let's talk a little bit more about this. Democratic Senator Mark Warner described the president's immigration proposal as, a starting point. But the Democrats say, look, they're not going to budge at all until they see the government reopen, and then maybe negotiations can start. So based on all of that information and what you're hearing, does this plan even stand a chance?
Well, the plan does stand a chance in this sense. It is a concession from the White House, and it puts a deal, or at least the beginnings of the outlines of some future deal on the table. And that's a significant concession from the White House. It is meant to create an atmosphere, if not of trust, at least of dialogue. And here's the central truth that this White House has come to recognize. Congressional Democrats and congressional Republicans possibly have realized, but it's becoming more and more apparent. Starting this next week, when paychecks for the second time start disappearing and the bureaucracies start really showing the strain of the government shutdown, this White House has been briefed. Things are going to start getting bad and exponentially worse with each and every passing week. So time is of the essence. Congress knows that. This White House knows that. And so by offering a concession, the president has said, okay, I'm at least willing to offer something. Is there going to be any answer back from Democrats? And the White House calculation is days and days of Democrats saying, no, absolutely not, is not a defensible political position. And that eventually Democrats are going to be willing to negotiate about something, and the talks can begin in earnest. So the White House, as the president said, wanted to break the logjam. Democrats might well and justifiably argue, it's a logjam you created yourself, Mr. President, and we're not going to help you bail it out. But the fact is, this government shutdown is going to get noticeably worse in the not-too-distant future, and that's not good for Congress or this White House. And at some point, this is going to have to be resolved. At least there's now an opening bid from the White House to move in that direction.
And Major, I'm glad that we here at CBS News are keeping a focus on those folks that are directly affected by this shutdown. But I want to just drill down a little bit more on the back and forth between the president and Nancy Pelosi. Democrats, including Pelosi, have basically criticized the president's plan because he's offering extended protection to Dreamers and TPS recipients that he himself revoked. So that's not, I guess, from the Democrat standpoint, they're saying that's unacceptable because it's not really offering anything that is different from what had existed before. So how can they begin negotiating if they won't even agree on what to negotiate on?
Well, it's a good question. And you can revisit all of that past history. Republicans would say with they would argue, justification? Well, the Obama administration approach to providing deferred adjudication for childhood arrivals, DACA, protection for the Dreamers, wasn't passed by Congress. It was an executive action that far outstripped existing and proper executive powers. You can have that debate. The president said during the campaign he would repeal it. He did. Where we are now is the president at least has offered something. Is it a way to solve every issue? No. But in the president's remarks on Saturday, he said, and then we'll have a bigger conversation about comprehensive immigration reform. And once he got criticized, as he knew he would, by conservative hardliners who said he was already peddling amnesty, the president on Twitter then said, no, amnesty is going to come later. Whoa. That was sort of missed over the weekend. The president said, when we have the second round of negotiations after the shutdown ends, and we're looking at comprehensive immigration reform, that's when amnesty is going to happen, describing it himself, apparently, as a new policy position. So it's clear there is flexibility here. What you have to do in a legislative context like this is build trust. Very hard to do right now. That's the biggest problem. Nobody trusts each other. Democrats simply do not trust the word of this administration, and I would argue the Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell has some reservations about trusting this White House as well. But you've got to start somewhere. And you've got to begin to build that trust, start negotiating over things that are doable, not the things that you demand, but that are doable, and then build from there.
That's interesting that you would talk about Mitch McConnell and his trust level with this White House, because he says he's going to introduce legislation that's going to incorporate some of what the president's immigration proposal has in it. He's going to introduce it this week, and I think he wants maybe them to be voting by next week. But what can you tell us about this legislation?
Well, it's all very fluid. So the president's proposal will be incorporated into a piece of legislation. And the plan this week, there is no announced date yet, have that proposal on the floor, and then right alongside of it, or possibly combined with it, that hasn't been determined yet, a series of spending bills to reopen the rest of the government. That would put a proposition before the Senate, reopen the government, and do what the president has offered in terms of a compromise. Then you have what? A test vote. You find out, do any Democrats, any conservative Democrats, like Joe Manchin in West Virginia, for example, find this something that they might vote for? If Democrats hold ranks and there isn't any divisions, and this offer from the White House doesn't pull them away from their Democratic leadership, then the White House has got to come to a very unpleasant conclusion. This compromise isn't enough. Democrats are remaining in lockstep, and you're going to have to do one of two things. This White House is going to soon learn. Compromise more, or declare a national emergency and watch this whole process get ratcheted up even more.
All right, Major Garrett, for us on a very chilly day at the White House. Major, thank you very much.
Sure.